We're here today with Republican candidate for Congressional District 8, Martha McSally. Martha, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to get started right away. We want to just learn a little bit more about you. Tell us about yourself and why you're running for Congress.
Well, I'm a retired fighter pilot, retired colonel in the Air Force, served my country for 26 years in uniform. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. I have 3 older brothers, and my dad died when I was 12, which was the single biggest impact on my life. At a very young age, I had to learn that every day is a gift. And I have a fire in my belly to make a difference, because in the last conversation I had with him, he told me to make him proud. And so I hit the ground running at a young age, and I've been moving out every day, really trying to use it as my last and make a difference in the world. I was the first woman to fly a fighter aircraft in combat in U.S. history. I was the first woman to command a combat squadron, and that's here at Davis-Monthan, the 354th Fighter Squadron. And I also worked for Senator John Kyle for a year as a legislative fellow. I was one of 7 in the Air Force selected to do that. So I got to see up close and personal how to get things done in Capitol Hill. People may most remember me for the person who took on the Pentagon for making our servicewomen wear Muslim garb when they were off base in Saudi Arabia about 10 years ago. I put my career on the line, I filed a lawsuit, and then I actually wrote legislation and got it passed unanimously in the House and as an amendment to the defense bill in the Senate and signed into law. So, I mean, those just a little bit about my background.
Very good. Let's talk about some things that set you apart from the other candidates. Let's pick a couple. Let's pick 2 things that set you apart.
Sure. I think there are 2 very important things. And I think on the issues, those who are voting in the primary may think, oh, we're very similar. Where we are different is, number 1, on experience, education, and proven record. So I have almost 28 years of serving my country, record of leadership, commanding in combat, working as a colonel. We are dealing with the strategic level issues that are facing our nation and our world. I have 2 master's degrees, one from Harvard in public policy and another one in strategic studies from Air War College, where I graduated number one in my class of 225 future leaders in the military. So I've got a proven record of leadership, of education, and of getting things done and making things happen. So we're very different as far as our backgrounds go. Another thing I think that makes me very different than the other candidates are, I can win the June 12th election. I'm not divisive, I'm not inflammatory, I'm not a hothead, and actually just based on my record, I do have an appeal to the community, I believe, and I very much am humbled by that, just based on my record that they believe they can trust me, even though they may not agree with me on a number of issues. So we've been through a lot as a community. We're at a critical time in our nation, and I think people are looking for, it's time to move forward with leadership and moral courage, and that's what I bring.
All right. What do you think are the 2 most critical issues facing southern Arizona right now?
Well, the first is I sort of combine together. It's the overwhelming debt that our nation has accumulated. It's almost $16 trillion, and also its impact on the economy. I'm combining these 2 together, really. So we have got to get our debt under control. I think people are waking up that this is not just normal deficit spending, but we're on a road to where Greece is right now, that if we don't do something different, we're going to be in a serious situation where it's going to impact our national security, our prosperity, our economy is going to be suffocated worse than what we've seen even in the last few years. And we don't have freedom of action in the world when a lot of our debt is owned by foreign governments. So the debt is strangulating the economy still. But combined with that is people need jobs. Obviously, they need good jobs. We want to get the economy going again. And so that is, from my view, the role of the federal government to get out of the way. The overregulation, the complexity of the tax code, the overtaxing. We got to get back to where the federal government is out of the way so that the entrepreneurial spirit and the innovative spirit of Americans and small businesses can actually flourish and get the economy going again. So I combine those 2 kind of into the top issue. The second is national security issues. There's many going on around the world, but the closest to us here in southern Arizona is the border. We've got transnational criminal organizations fighting wars just south of us, and they're trafficking weapons, slaves, people, and money and drugs into our neighborhoods. And this is very serious. The federal government doesn't have the political will right now in order to secure the border and address this. It's their responsibility. And the southern Arizonans are ready for this to be fixed, and to have somebody representing them in D.C. that's actually got the experience and the understanding of how to fix it and is actually going to get it done.
Okay. If you are elected, what would be your first priority?
Well, my first priority is to immediately get to Washington, D.C. and lead. I mean, we need leadership right now. We're at such a critical time in America. And you don't, having been on Capitol Hill, you don't get a luxury of saying, I'm just going to address one thing. I mean, there's a myriad of things facing our nation right now. There's many things that you see even before the House of Representatives on a daily basis. So I'm just going to provide that leadership, that credibility, that expertise in order to start fighting for the people of Southern Arizona and actually start working on getting our debt under control, getting the economy going again, you know, giving that freedom and opportunity to small businesses and securing our border. That's going to be my immediate priority.
Okay. You talked about national security. Let's talk a little bit about border security. What is your plan to secure our border with Mexico?
Well, I look at it as a military person, both tactically and strategically. Tactically, we have to actually secure the border. I mean, I've actually planned combined ground and air operations in other places around the world, in Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa, and other places. And this is not difficult to do. We know how to do this. We just haven't had the will to do it. So we need to use the combination of barriers and fences where appropriate, plus manpower at the border. I mean, if the front line is at the border, we need our manpower to actually be at the border, not 50 miles deep, not roaming around other places. So we got to put the manpower there. We've got to use other technologies, sensors, sonar, radar, plus aircraft, drones and manned aircraft, in order to have intelligence-driven operations to be able to detect, track, and intercept illegal activity. This is not difficult. We're doing it around the world. You know, we're trying to secure the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, 11.5 time zones away, yet this is in our backyard. So, I mean, I've planned operations like this before. I know how to do this, and so I'll hit the ground running and make sure that we've got the political will to do that. But strategically, we also need to look at the root causes. It's in our best interest to have a secure, stable, prosperous neighbor to the south of us. There's a war going on there, and we need to partner with our neighbor to the south because it's in our best interest, both diplomatically, economically, and with security assistance, to have stability and prosperity there in order to address the root causes of what's going on right now.
Immigration, when we talk about how that's connected to security, what changes would you make to our current immigration laws?
Well, the current system is painful. I mean, as most people will tell you. I mean, we have military officers that are married to someone from another country who take years for them to be able to, you know, legally become a citizen. We have other high-level skills that we are seeing come into our country, get educated, and then leave when we actually need those skills here. So the old sort of painful bureaucratic process of random quotas, it's just not working for us. So we need to change the system so that it's smart and it benefits Americans. We need to make sure it's streamlined so it's not so long and painful, which also incentivizes illegal activity. And we need to look both on the high end, based on kind of supply and demand. What kind of skills do we need to actually stay in America to make sure America stays on the path to be the superpower and be prosperous? And then on the low end, we need to take a look at, you know, what kind of processes do we need for the you know, skills on the lower end to make sure that the economy is continuing to flourish and that we're partnering, you know, with our neighbors in order to have both of our prosperities, which are dependent on each other, going in the right direction. So it does need to be streamlined and reformed for sure.
All right, you were talking about some of the skill sets of the people who want to come here, and hopefully they stay here with that. Let's talk a little bit about education. We're going to get hyper-local now. We want to talk a little bit about the Mexican-American Studies program. I'm sure you're well aware of the restrictions that were placed on that program within TUSD, which essentially forced it out. What's your position on that move?
Well, my position as someone who's applying for the job to be a member of the House of Representatives is this is not a federal government issue. I mean, this was an issue that happened between the state and the local government. And I mean, my mom was an educator. She retired at the age of 77 as an educator. I mean, I'm the product of a good education, obviously, with the opportunities I've had, bachelor's and 2 master's degrees. So I am very passionate about education, but as a conservative, I think the federal government needs to stay out of the business of education, and it needs to be driven at the local level with parent involvement, where there's innovation, where there's competition, where there's excellence that's rewarded for teachers and for schools. So this is a local issue that was going on really between the local schools and the state, and it is important. I'll give you my opinion, but it's not necessarily a governing opinion as someone who's applying for a federal job, if that makes sense. I mean, my opinion is that it is important to be honoring the heritage of all the you know, ethnicities of Americans, but it's also important to be teaching basic American history in elementary school. I mean, you can branch out to you know, the other types of things to learn when you get into the college level. But at the basic level, we need to be making sure that all of our kids understand our full American history, because that's where we're really lacking in many ways. So, you know, I know it's a very divisive issue within the community, and in general, I would say my perspectives are that I look at things objectively and analytically and not emotionally as I'm running for this office, and I'm going to come down objectively on these issues that are going to be affecting the federal government. This is a local issue.
So do you support the move then to get rid of the program?
Based on what I know and what I've studied about it, I think it was an appropriate move to get rid of the program, yes.
Okay. We have a question from a viewer.
Yep.
Her name is Sally Chandler. Sally says, I'm sick and tired of our children graduating from high school without knowing basic skills. No Child Left Behind has, if anything, made things worse. Do you have plans for changing this, and how would you pay for it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Although the intent of No Child Left Behind was perhaps good, that we need to do something to raise the standards of you know, our education. We're right now number 23 in the world in math and 31 in science, and we're America. I mean, we're supposed to be #1 in those things. So although the intent was there, anytime the federal government gets involved, it's going to be bureaucratic, it's going to be you know, standardized, where it squashes innovation. And I grew up in Rhode Island. Education in Rhode Island does not have the same needs as education in Arizona. So No Child Left Behind needs to be repealed. And I mean, I think testing is a good thing. I'm not of the school that says, oh, we don't want to test kids because then they'll feel bad if they don't, you know, pass the test. You do need to be tested, but it needs to be locally driven. We need to have that be, you know, at the lowest level. That's, again, parent involvement, locally driven, so that kids are actually learning, and they're learning how to think critically, which is not what No Child Left Behind does. What that does is take away teachers and schools' time, paperwork, and teaching to test, and it's just not making our education any better. So we need to repeal it. We need to get the federal government out of the business of education and let it be addressed at the local level.
So the second part of her question is, how would you pay for it?
Well, I see no reason why we should keep having money be sent from here to Washington, D.C. to be sent back for education. So I think we need to go back to the federal government being minimally involved, and this being a state and local driven and funded, you know, education should be more state and local driven and funded, and stop having to send our money to D.C. and get less of it back in order to actually fund the education.
Okay. One more question on the topic of education, and this is one that we've been looking into a lot here at 9 on Your Side, and that is the number of suicides in Tucson. In our schools, there have been 4 students who have committed suicide in this school year alone. How do you think the problem of bullying, it's been connected to these suicides, how do you think the problem should be addressed?
Well, again, as someone who's running for the House of Representatives, I don't think it's a federal issue. It's tragic. Obviously, these suicides are just absolutely tragic. Any life that is snuffed out is tragic, but certainly having a young person taking their own life because of the pressures that they're feeling or the bullying that's going on is just absolutely unacceptable, and deep tragedy for obviously their family and for this community. Not related to bullying, but you know, I've been on the board of directors for Teen Challenge of Arizona, which is a faith-based drug and alcohol recovery program that's highly successful, but they deal with kids in crisis. You know, the Springboard Home for Girls deals with young girls in crisis that have turned to drugs and alcohol, some of them even on the road with attempted suicides, and just absolutely tragic. And so I care, you know, deeply about this community and have been involved in things like Teen Challenge since I've been in and out of this community for almost 10 years. That needs to be addressed, obviously, at the local level, at the school level, parent involvement again, in order to make sure that we are not creating an environment, or there's an environment that is driving our young people to take their own lives and the promise of their future away from them. It's just heartbreaking, and it needs to stop.
Okay. Let's move on to talk about the economy. How about that? Let's choose 3 things that you would do to stimulate the economy.
Sure. I don't like the word stimulate because that has certain connotations to it.
Boost.
But I mentioned it kind of in my opening statements. I think the federal government keeps trying to fix the economy, but what they're doing is continuing to spend our hard-earned taxpayers' money, putting us further into debt, and actually not allowing the small businesses, which are the entrepreneurial spirit and the engine of growth in America, to actually flourish. So what do we need to do? we need to roll back the federal regulations that are really suffocating small businesses. There are just so many of them. I talked to many, businessmen and women in town, and they're just, to meet the regulatory guidance is just extraordinary time and effort, confusing, redundant, and sometimes just completely inapplicable to what they're even, their business is even doing. So rolling back federal regulation in order to get out of the way so that small businesses can flourish is one thing. The second thing is to deal with the lowering taxes and to simplify the tax code. Right now, our taxes are so complex at the corporate and the individual level. It takes us 6.8 billion man-hours in order to get our taxes done in America, which is over 3 million jobs if you were to equate that to sort of the cost of, paying employees. So we've got to simplify the tax code, and we've got to get the tax code lower. As of yesterday, we have the highest corporate taxes in the world now that Japan changed their rates. So we got to simplify it. We got to bring those rates down so that businesses are wanting to come to America, obviously. And then there's a lot of, people need to realize that at the local level, they need to be electing the right people to the Pima County Board of Supervisors and at the state level, because, we got to make sure that we have a business-friendly environment here locally so businesses are coming here versus Phoenix. I'm going to do my part to make sure that we're coming here versus India, at the federal level, but we still need to work together with the local government to make sure that good businesses want to come to Arizona and want to come to Southern Arizona.